Hey everybody, this is Josh from JR003JacobSokol, and I'm so amped about this interview with the good friend that I've ended up hooking up with recently. His name is Jacob Sokol. He's based in New York, and without further ado, I'll let him introduce himself and tell a little bit about his story and background.
Hey Josh, thanks a lot. Again, I'm really privileged to have the time to connect with you, and I just want to let it be known that this is my first interview, so if you could just make the questions as hard as possible, that would be great for me.
I'll try my best, man. I can't promise anything.
Yeah, cool, because I figure then for the upcoming interviews, it can only get easier from that point on, right?
Yeah, man, you hit it on the head.
Okay, cool. So I'll give the listeners a quick background story. How I came to creating Sensify.com, which is the blog that I run, is about 2 years ago. I was working as an IT consultant in Times Square, New York, and it was a great job. I had a really cool mentor, really good learning experience and opportunity where I was working. But at some point, about 2 or 3 years into the job, I realized that it was a great career. It just wasn't a calling. So, although I was making good money for someone who was 23 at the time, I had a nice apartment, a nice car, motorcycle, kind of going out enjoying the luxuries of a materialistic life. I didn't have that feeling in the morning waking up like, hey, I can't wait to go live my day. I can't wait to go out and get up and do what I'm going to do today. It was more like the monotonous routine of, another day, another dollar.
Right.
So I didn't know what the next step was, but I always told myself that I was going to travel to Europe by the time I was 25 years old. And that was coming up, so I figured out how to get 5 weeks away from work. And I went to Europe, and something really, really magical happened to me in Europe. Before I went, I was reaching out to all my boys, all my friends, and I'm like, come on, let's go to Europe, kind of rallying the troops, and no one was with it. Nobody had that intense desire to get out there like I did. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go, with or without you. I'll do this alone if I have to. So I ended up going to Europe for 5 weeks, and something, like I said, something really magical happened. And that was that about 3 weeks in, I started breaking what I call my patterns. And the patterns for me were mostly, there was one sense of the pattern, which was the daily routine, right? So I'm not waking up and taking a shower and brushing my teeth, although I was doing those things, not in the particular order that I've been doing them for the last 3 years. But I'm out traveling, I'm experiencing new things, so my daily patterns were different. And the major shift was my psychological patterns. So I kind of, up until that point, I kind of thought that I was what I was doing. And it may be a little philosophical or a little psychological, but I was really able to disassociate myself from with what I thought, which was a humongous epiphany for me. And I was like, wait a second, if I'm not these thoughts that I think, that means that I can change these thoughts and I can become something more than what I think today.
Right.
Where at the time I didn't have that hope. I just kind of associated I am what I think. So I broke my patterns, and it was the most liberating thing in the world. And so I started to play with that, and I came home after 5 weeks. And at that point, I knew I couldn't go back to the position I was in. So to cut a long story a little bit shorter, is I figured out basically how over the course of the next 6 months to reduce all my bills, sell my car, sell my motorcycle, cancel my TV subscription, cancel my home phone, pack my lunches for work, and I figured out how to leave my job and just kind of not know what the next step is, but know that it wasn't doing what I was doing. So that's a good foundation, and from that, Sensify arose. As I was doing some kind of journaling and playing with this, I was like, well, how can I, be of service to the world? Like, I just left a job where I was making pretty good money because it's not about the money. So then what is it? And for me, it was really about doing what I'm passionate about, identifying what I'm even passionate about, because, we kind of assume that we know ourselves so well, but when we're facing these big questions like, what are your passions? If you had all the time and all the money in the world, what would you do? What do you want your life to look like in 10 years?
Right.
So once I really started, asking myself these deeper questions and spending the time to reflect upon them, I got a better sense of who I was as a person. And then I said, okay, well, how can I use who I am as a person in service to the world? And Sensophy is a way for basically me to just talk about what I'm most passionate about with, the why behind it is that so not only can I talk about it, but hopefully I can serve the world in the process of doing that.
That's awesome, man. I had no idea that your traveling over to Europe had such a profound effect for you. Now, I recall listening to, and I forget where you were actually doing the phone call, but the conversation you had with Brian from, is it philosophynotes.com?
Yeah, Brian from Philosopher's Notes has been a humongous inspiration and turned out to be a good friend and mentor at this point.
Like, obviously, you just said he played a significant role in your opening your eyes, but what I think is awesome for everyone to realize is that once you took yourself out of all these influences where you were working as an IT consultant and then going over to Europe and being in a completely different and disassociated environment, how when you came back, it was ironic because it's almost like you were Alice coming back to the real world and you're realizing, hey man, this is 10 levels down from what I want to be doing. It just couldn't compare. So what's cool about you is you changed your lifestyle. So you mentioned, so can you tell me, because I know a lot of people will be interested in finding out, I want to get more connected. I want to be more involved. I want to be more in sync with myself and what I want to do. But yours is a unique and for some people a really brave step in, say, leaving a job. How was it that you were able to leverage leaving your full-time job where you were making money and then to be able to follow your passion of Sensophy.com and helping others through inspiration and, sharing philosophy?
Absolutely, man. So it wasn't overnight, I'll tell you that from the get-go. It took me about a little more than 6 months from the time I got back to the time where I actually left my job. And it was a lot of planning, a lot of saving, a lot of reducing, a lot of just saying, hey, what do I really need in my life and what don't I? There's the positive psychology movement, which is over the course really of only the last 10 years, where they're saying, let's study what the positive effects of psychology are. I think in the last 100 years before that, for every 99 articles written about, negative things related to psychology, schizophrenia, or all these other psychological illnesses, there was one article written for positive. So in the last 10 years, they've really started to pay attention to what are some of the positive aspects of psychology. And what they've been able to account is they say that material goods, financial wealth, status, kind of car you drive, once you reach a basic necessity where you can survive, they only really account for 10% of your happiness in life, which is astounding. So where does the other 90% of your happiness come from? And they say that 50% of it is genetic, which, if you got the happiness gene, great. If you don't, better luck to you next time. But the other 40% is things that you can actually work on. So, things like being grateful, that's proven, like to have a appreciation journal, it's proven to increase happiness. Working out has been proven to increase happiness. So I figured out, okay, well, money is not my primary currency. My primary currency is happiness. So I don't need to spend, 18 hours a day chasing after what's only going to bring me 10% of that happiness. Let me start doing things like appreciating life more. I started meditating daily. My nutrition got a big check. I started eating better. And I really started to focus, okay, like how can I, without the material stuff, really create a life that's meaningful and brings me a deeper sense of fulfillment. So again, a big part of it was just planning for savings. And then in America, we have what's called unemployment. Unemployment, you need to be fired from your job to receive. So fortunately, I came to a agreement with my employees where they just said, listen, it's not in either of our best interests to have you on board right now. We're going to let you go. So I didn't quit. They actually let me go and therefore made me eligible to collect unemployment, which is actually lasting for a decent amount of time. So those were the two main things: savings and then reducing my lifestyle, and then unemployment as well has been a major help.
Dude, that is amazing, man. I was holding back from what could have been interpreted as inappropriate laughter because I would never have thought. I mean, okay, for all my callers, Jacob probably is not saying that you should attempt to get fired so you can get on the benefit. But what But what you're saying is it's really important to minimize everything downscale so that you're getting by financially and then look for those sources of happiness from what you can proactively do, how you can affect others and let them affect yourself as well. So you're not revolving around having the biggest TV or the greatest car or going out all the time, being in a social scene that costs a lot of money. Is that right?
Oh, well said, man. Very well said.
It's all right. I'm just trying to stave off the tide of people waiting to get on Benefit Now after hearing this call. So one of the things that's so awesome is, like you say, so much of it is about positive psychology. You mentioned the positive psychology movement and how it's important to have something that I'm not well aware of or acquainted with, which is an appreciation journal. Are you able to just kind of explain that to people? Because I'm sure everyone's got a journal where they, put in their entries daily or weekly or whatnot. But what's an appreciation journal? Is it any different?
Sure. So it is not all that different, and I'm not appreciation journal expert, but for the way that I would use this practice is just every morning waking up, first thing I do is I meditate for a half hour. Then I look to work out for about a half hour as well, and then sit down and do some journaling and just kind of list what you're grateful for. Like I said, it has been scientifically proven to increase happiness, and it actually reminds you of everything that you have, whether it's just listing your health or your relationships or just your ability to sit down and actually write at that moment. Like, there's something great about that. I mean, there's a gazillion things that you could write about being grateful for. There's no end to it. So just the process of each day reminding yourself, everything that you have to be grateful for. You can do that in the morning, at night, and you don't even need a journal, really. You can just do it throughout your day, just a constant reminder, or setting a calendar entry on your phone, every day, 3 o'clock, gratitude, boom, and you just say, okay, what am I grateful for at this moment, no matter what situation you're in.
Right. With some people listening to this, they'll be thinking, that's quite cool. Like, you took yourself out of your comfort zone. You realized that there was another way to live. You've come back and attempted to adapt your lifestyle to suit your needs or, the core basics that you require with regard to happiness. But for some that may be skeptics or maybe cautious or, may have their own personal barriers to doing the similar things that you've done, has there been certain events that have happened in, say, the last however long you've been doing this, where you can just testify that if I hadn't started focusing on the important things in my life, like my personal happiness, disregarding material wealth, then I would never have been able to do A, B, or C. Can you give any examples for people?
Hey, absolutely. And just to make this clear, I have not discarded material wealth. I'm definitely interested in that. Just the priority level has shifted, but feel free by all means if you have any extra. I'm here. So the first thing that comes to mind is what I call fundamentals, and this is actually something I got from Brian Johnson at philosophersnotes.com. And what he says is get consistent on your fundamentals. So what are fundamentals? What he describes them as are things that if you do this every day, you're going to have a better life because you did it. So identify what your fundamentals are. For you, it may be interviewing a person a day. You may say, hey, I feel great after interviewing somebody. I want to do an interview a day. Now, that may be a little far out and far-fetched. Maybe not. But for me, I was able to identify what my fundamentals are. So meditating every day, kind of clearing my mind and being able to train and focus my mind, that was one. Number 2, working out every day. That's another fundamental of mine. Number 3, nutrition. Just really watching how I eat. It has such a huge impact on my energy level. And I've actually become a vegetarian, almost vegan, since I originally left my job. Another one is creating every day. I have to do some writing or some journaling. And another one is being playful and just being social and just saying, hey, if I feel like it or not, I'm going to go play. I'm going to have some fun. If it's chasing my cats around the house with a broom, whatever it is, I'm going to do something playful. So identifying what your fundamentals are and then kind of creating a lifestyle that you can enable yourself to be consistent with those, that has, brought me a humongous return. And the best thing, like there's been some really big things, like the Gary Vaynerchuk challenge was huge, or me even having Sensify where it is right now is pretty big for me. But I'd say the best thing is my moment-to-moment, second-to-second quality of life. Just my experience of living, just walking through the world, just right now. is at an all-time high. Because before I left for Europe, man, there were some days where I was on the top of the mountain, and there were some days when I was on the floor. Like, I had really high highs, and I had really low lows. And that fluctuation of inconsistency has really leveled off at a above average place. So it would just be an overall quality of life improvement. That would be my number one thing that, I see kind of affecting people by being able to do something like that.
That is so cool, man. And one of the coolest things too is you mentioned the Gary Vaynerchuk challenge, and we'll come back to that one because that's really interesting. I'm sure a lot of the listeners will be acquainted with Gary Vaynerchuk. But what I wanted to touch on was when you mentioned how your quality of life, second to second, moment to moment, it's all hugely improved. How have you been received by your family and friends that knew you as that's quote unquote old Jacob? We'll call him that.
Yeah, for sure, man. So the old Jacob received violent opposition for becoming the new Jacob. I can't say that this was a walk in the park. I mean, this was some of the most difficult and challenging things that I've ever done. Another thing that was huge for me is that I'm 25 years old now. Up until last year, I've never had a long-term girlfriend in my life. Granted, I've been, with plenty of girls, but I've never had a healthy relationship. And I really wanted to tackle, why was that? Like, what was going on there? So now I've been in an 11th month relationship with my girlfriend. So that was another amazing thing for me. And so yeah, and I'm sorry, I kind of went off on my own tangent there.
No, that's okay, man.
Can you repeat where you were going with that before I just went into Lover's Land?
Yeah, well, hey, coming back from Lover's Land, because I think Lover's Land is a good point to make, that if you do focus on positive psychology, you can find love. But as well as that, it's just, whether there were any conflicts between who the old Jacob was to who you wanted to become, and then how you kind of dealt with your peer group, whether you, had to back off or embrace people with strong positivity in order to bring them around to your perception of how you want to live your life.
Gotcha, man. Yeah, so it wasn't easy. We have these built-in roles with people that we've known our whole life, and those aren't easy to break. They're not. I don't have a great explanation for saying, like, hey, this is the awesome way to kind of address everyone who you know. It's difficult, man. I kind of had to put some relationships at risk by saying, hey, I don't really give a crap what any of you think about me. This is what I have to do. And there's, some contradiction in that. Of course, I care about these people. They're close to me, and I'm always willing to have an open conversation with anybody pretty much about anything at this point in my life, which is an amazing feeling. But at the same time, some people, feelings did get hurt, and there were some conflict. And looking back almost a year later now, that hurt and that conflict has been resolved, so that's amazing. But there definitely is. I distance myself from friends who kind of didn't have the same mindset as me. If on Sensify, if you sign up for the newsletter, there's you get a opt-in for a book called Sensify Psychic Reading.
And can you tell that I've actually seen the book? And can you tell everyone, just so that they know how much value they're getting, what the estimated worth of that book is?
$1 billion.
Oh, okay, $1 billion. Sorry about that. Yeah, for everyone.
Yeah. It's been debated, but that's the number that we've arrived at is $1 billion value.
I'm sure you took that as the average too. So.
Yeah, and we didn't want to be too cocky, so we were a little humble with with the pricing.
Awesome, man. Hey, what I love about you talking about your peer groups, and sometimes you have to distance yourself from one or two that maybe holding you back, is that it touches so strongly on one of the quotes that I heard Tony Robbins say, which was, people's lives are a direct reflection of the expectations of their peer group. So, you sing that statement true by recognizing that some people are going to hang around, some of your truer friends, other ones are going to have problems dealing with it because they'll see it as a conflict or, maybe a negative reflection on themselves. But the fact that you are, continually open to conversation, regardless of with who it is, with whoever it is, it just shows that there's a huge amount of development that's gone on in your side of the woods in order for you to get to that point.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. And so getting back to what that book is, the Sensify Psychic Reading, Tony Robbins' mentor was a guy named Jim Rohn. So Jim Rohn actually had this quote that says something along the lines of, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So in other words, if I didn't know Josh, but I knew the five people that you spent the most time with, I could balance out how much money they make. I could balance out what their hobbies are. I could average in, what their overall state is. I could balance in how optimistic they are. And I can average in all these different things. And I would have a pretty good estimate of who you are.
Right.
So, I mean, that alone is pretty profound. And then it's like, okay, well, how do we use that to our advantage? How do we kind of take that knowledge and then turn it into action, which is what sensophy is. If you break down the word sensophy, it comes from the word sense, which means to feel, and the word sophy, which means action. Which means knowledge. So or wisdom. So it's to feel wisdom. It's the feeling of not only knowing the knowledge, but then, actually the action of like using that wisdom. It's that feeling. So, okay, so we kind of know this wisdom. We know this knowledge of we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. But then what do we do with that? So I'm a huge fan of studying successful people and seeing like, what did they do to get where they are? Because I'm a wholehearted believer in process, like just figure out what the process is. And so a major factor for me figuring out how do I become the average of the 5 people that I spend the most time with, well, I have to, figure out who I want those 5 people to be. And for everyone, that may not be so easy at work. You're next to your coworkers and you may not have an option to disassociate yourself with them. But what I was able to do is actually become a part of a mastermind group. And I mean, that has been a tremendous benefit to me being able to actualize my goals. And without my mastermind group, I mean, the Gary Vaynerchuk challenge, not only would it have it not happened, meaning that I wouldn't have been challenged to even do that, but even if I was challenged, without their support and their insight, it wouldn't have got done. So for people who are interested in kind of getting their own mastermind group, there's a website called meetup.com, which you could check out. And then there, also just reach out to people. If you see someone on a blog, see somebody who's commenting on another person's blog, if you see a person who's running another blog, these people are all really accessible for the most part. Reach out to them from an authentic place. And people can sense when you're authentic. People can just, we have that animal intuition kind of deep in us that we can kind of just tell if someone's being real. And just, put yourself out there, make the connection. It's been really, really significant in me realizing me actualizing what I want to get done.
Dude, that's amazing. And so for all the listeners, the website that you mentioned just before is meetup, meetup.com, because you're the second person I've talked to who can vouch for the benefits of having a mastermind group. The first one being Corbett Barr, who we spoke to about a month or so ago. And apparently he knows you quite well as well, which is how I ended up hitting your site. But when it comes to masterminds, is it kind of like a plan that you go through? Like, do you have a layout of your meetings, or is it just you let it flow and whatever happens, happens?
So initially, when we started the mastermind group, I was really big at the time on this philosophy of, doing the unrealistic can be realistic. So we ended up coming together. One friend reached out to me and we had a really passionate conversation, and we were like, hey, this would just be awesome if we could talk every week on the phone. Like, imagine what that would do for us. We just felt so, inspired after the call. And it was like, cool, why don't you reach out to, the next person and the next person and see if they're interested. So the next day I'm ready to reach out to, the next person, and behold, they end up calling me and they're like, Jacob, I had this idea. It would be really cool if we could just kind of talk once a week about things we're passionate about in a group setting. And I'm like, you're not going to believe. I was just going to call you today. So initially we started off the mastermind group by saying, hey, let's do a 4-week run and let's kind of put this unrealistic philosophy into use. We'll all set an unrealistic goal for ourselves that normally we wouldn't have the balls to really pick, but since we're all kind of coming together collectively, we're going to actually, pick one. So to me, I actually got challenged, hey, see if you could take Gary Vaynerchuk to a Jets game. So I was like, okay, that's the perfect goal for this right now. And, lo and behold, that was about 3 months ago, I've been to the Jets game, and we continue to talk weekly on the call. So it's worked out really well.
Wicked. And for those of you that don't realize, or are unfamiliar, can you give a little background on who Gary Vaynerchuk is?
Yeah, sure. So Gary Vaynerchuk is like this rock star entrepreneur guy who claims that one day he's going to own an American football team called the New York Jets, which would cost about $1 billion American, which is nuts. So the guy, he immigrated from Russia when he was a kid, so he's a self-made millionaire at this point. And what he did was he was able to take his parents' wine business from, I think they were making about $4 million a year, and using social media tools like Facebook and Twitter and even just regular Web 2.0, he was able to take their business from, I think, about $4 million to, I'd like to say $60 million in 5 or 6 years or something along those lines.
Yep, I heard something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, he's a major player in the game right now, and he's wrote a book called Crush It, Why Now is the Time to Cash In on Your Passion, that basically says, with an $800 laptop and a $30 cable modem connection, there's no reason why you can't make a living doing what you love. It's going to cost you a lot of sweat equity, but, it's just your time. So he was a major inspiration as far as getting Sensify up and running as well.
That's awesome, man. And you already kind of briefly covered it, but I really want to dig deep with the process, because what I found so awesome is that you'd actually put entries in as you went through this process, from not even knowing the guy, maybe promoting his book and some of the stuff you learned in the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. But could you just walk us through what the stages were for you from, outset to accomplishment?
Great, yeah, sure. So I was reading the 4-Hour Workweek, and I'm going to share a couple lines with you from the book that really struck me, right?
Sweet.
So Tim Ferriss, who's the author, says, the common sense rules of the real world are a fragile collection of socially reinforced illusions. He said the worst that could happen wasn't crashing and burning. It was accepting terminal boredom as a tolerable status quo. He continues, the fishing is best where the fewest go, and the collective insecurity of the world makes it easy for people to hit home runs while everyone else is aiming for base hits. You won't believe what you can accomplish by attempting the impossible with the courage to repeatedly fail better. It's lonely at the top. 99% of the people in the world are convinced that they are incapable of achieving great things, so they aim for mediocre. The level of competition is thus fiercest for realistic goals, paradoxically making them the most time-consuming. And he goes on to continue to say he's prepared to do battle for a dream that is worth dreaming. So I was like, wow, that philosophy is freaking dope. I was like, yo, I love that. So, but it's so unrealistic. I mean, he's talking a big talk, but who actually is willing to walk that? Like he says, 99% of people are not going to do that, and he's right. But I was like, I already was able to move on from my job and kind of like create this lifestyle. And I'm so inspired by what he's saying. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just going to like write about it on my website. So I write about it. I actually create a video, and one of the readers, who ended up being a mastermind group member later on, one of the readers says, Jacob, what you said was so inspiring. He's like, it really touched me. And I'm curious, though, as a stretch goal to get you out of your comfort zone, I'm curious if you could actually, do something that's unrealistic, like get Gary Vaynerchuk to a Jets game before he owns the Jets. How cool would that be? So I'm like, dude, I read what he wrote, and I'm like, the guy's name is John, and I'm like, John, I'm like, dude, get real. I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, get real. Are you nuts, bro? I'll take Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm a no-name. This guy is a, multi-millionaire. He's going to own the Jets. How am I going to take him to a Jets game? And then, so I'm like thinking of polite ways to reply without looking like a punk, without looking like a little douche. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right. So I start walking around my apartment, and I'm like, okay, now I just start entertaining the thought, Gary Vaynerchuk to a Jets game, Gary Vaynerchuk to a Jets game, and I'm like cursing at John in the air. I'm like, screw you, John, how dare you challenge me? And so I'm like, okay. So one thing leads to another, and I just felt so called. Like I felt like it was something so much. I was like, okay, there's just so much passion behind this right now. Like I just started feeling like I started getting chills in my body, and I started watering up in my eyes. Like it really touched me emotionally. And I was like, I'm not going to take this challenge on just to go to a game with with Gary Vaynerchuk. To me, there's no heart in that. Like, it's cool, yeah, it's a great thing to do if I was like drunk with my college buddies or something, but like, this is my life. I'm like, there has to be something deeper than just like going to a game with him. So I'm like, well, if I document the entire process and show, hey, this is more about the process of being able to go out and kind of live your dreams, no matter how unrealistic it is, and I can demonstrate and exemplify that philosophy to the world, I'm like, okay, there's a heart in that. Like, I'm down to do that. And you know, at the time, I'm thinking maybe I'll just get to his office and shoot a video with him, which would just be cool itself, just to be like, hey, I met the guy. But there was a big part of me that was also saying, you know, as cool as this is, I'm just going to take it on, and whether I do it or not, I'm going to share, you know, the results. So that's how it came about. And then through the process, if you check out Sensify.com, by the time this interview is up, there'll be a post that says how Tim Ferriss took me to a Jets game with Gary Vaynerchuk. And that documents about 8 separate postings that goes through the entire process of how this happened. I mean, down from how I was meditating to what I was eating and journaling at the time. It really goes into the nitty-gritty detail of the process.
See, and I love that headline too, because I mean, the copy's very nice, man. You should, you deserve a couple points for that one. And going on headlines or subject headers, could you share with the listeners what you ended up naming the subject header of the email you sent Gary Vaynerchuk himself, and why you named it that?
Yeah, sure. So the name of the email that I wrote to Gary was actually, Gary, do you give a fuck? And the reason that I wrote that is because one of my mastermind members, whose name is Electra, actually, a great woman, she was helping me with this challenge. So she sent me a video that Gary basically gave a speech at, I think, like a Web 2.0 conference, something like that, and he's telling these people, you know, they're all really, you know, mastermind geniuses, and he's like, listen, doesn't matter how freaking smart you are, you have to care. He's like, you're not going to succeed in this world if you don't care about people right now. He's like, you have to give a fuck, and he's just drilling it in these people's heads. You have to give a fuck. You have. So I saw that video, and I was like, you know, I think we may be able to use this. Like, it's a little cool that I was kind of getting called out by one of my readers on, hey, you know, Jacob, let's see if you're really about it, if you're the real deal or not. And then at the same time, I was kind of calling Gary out, like, hey, Gary, you know, are you the real deal? Like, do you give a fuck? So I thought it was really cool how it was bigger than me, you know, that the challenge, and that's the reason, you know, I could tell you wholeheartedly, that's the reason that this actually happened, is because I took that on because it was bigger than Jacob. There was a heart in that path. And I'd love to actually share a quote by a guy named Viktor Frankl, who is
awesome, man. That'd be great.
Yeah. So he was a psychologist. I think he was around during the Holocaust. He's actually a Holocaust survivor. So this was really, really inspiring to me. Viktor Frankl says, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do and go on to carry it to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run, I say, success will follow you precisely because you have forgotten to think about it." So with that being said, that's a big part of the philosophy behind, you know, really where I'm at in life right now. Really just in the long run of doing what I know is right, living a path with a heart that's bigger than myself, that's not just about my own, you know, enhancement or growth in the world, although it is very much about my own enhancement and growth. But really, I'm going to be dead. You know, I'm not going to live forever. What have I done on this earth when I'm gone? Like, what impact have I made? You know, am I willing to die for something that's going to improve people's lives in a tremendous way? Maybe. I don't know. I may be. I may not be. But these are the kind of things I play with. Like, it's bigger than Jacob. It's bigger than Josh. This is about the world. So, I'm no hero or anything. I don't want to portray myself to be, Superman, but it's a great philosophy to play with.
Yeah, man, that is amazing. I was getting chills when I was listening to that excerpt from Viktor Frankl because I've never heard it before. But
Wow.
it's amazing. It just goes to show that no one can ever stop pursuing their own personal development. Like I'd like to think that I've read a number of books and listened to a number of audiobooks, but okay, I lie. I haven't read any books, but I've listened to heaps of audiobooks, and it just goes to show you've always got to be continually learning because there are things that you think you know that you just don't know until you hear somebody else talking about it, whether it's another author or another personal development coach or something like that. So that might be an important key for many of our listeners because for me personally as well, I haven't looked at pursuing success in the same light that you've just portrayed it in that excerpt. So that could be a point of difference to how I perform in the next, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, if I'm able to take what Viktor Frankl said and maybe just modify my path to, my own personal growth as well. So hopefully people are going to take up on that offer and go out and find more info. Search out. Can you mention the book that's from? Because I think that would be really good for people if they could get a hold of.
Hey, man, truth be told, I've never read the book, but I know the quote, and as you were kind of speaking about it, I got chills in my body as well. It's huge. It's really, really huge. And I think that's also what's so cool about some of this positive psychology or even personal development stuff, or even just the life that you live, is that it comes through. Like Viktor Frankl said that, I think, in like 1947, and we're here in 2010, and we're getting chills in our body because of something he said back then, or because of the life that he created back then. So even though, we may not see results from kind of quote unquote doing our work to become the person that we know we can be, even though we may not be seeing those results tomorrow or next month, and we'll see some results, but I mean, I'm talking about real results. It's the long haul. It's 50 years from now. Like, that was a humongous question when I was doing my journaling. What do I want my life to look like 50 years from now? And I actually wrote pages and pages visualizing what I would look like as a 75-year-old man. And then how do I make that, and how do I make that happen, in the process? So, unfortunately, I don't have the name of that book, but I'm sure Google does.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Google is our friend. And, what I wanted to jump on is we've touched on some of the mindsets, how we can go through building ourselves up and strengthening not only ourselves but others through, say, mastermind groups and getting a bearing of where we want to head in life. What I want to do is grab some action steps. So whether it's the top 3 action steps you'd recommend to people who are listening to this call that they could go through and try and implement on a daily basis, or maybe even just one, because I know we've already touched on fundamentals. But if you could think of your maybe your top 3 that you'd recommend people start doing from the moment they finish this call, then what would they be?
Check out centipede.com. No. In all seriousness, journaling is a really profound practice, and it's somewhat difficult even for me sometimes to just sit down and journal, because it really requires a certain introspection to oneself that is not praised in our modern culture. I mean, we're just kind of supposed to conform to what's going on in the masses. So kind of being able to have a deeper insight and knowledge of self as to who we are is, not always applauded. So journaling is a huge process, and if you go on Sensify, there's actually a section called Quality Questions, and these were the first posts that I ever put up, and they're just questions that I kind of journaled just to get more clarity of what I wanted out of life. And there's something magical about really determining what it is that you want out of life, and then not taking bull force action, not taking like this, I'm going to ram my head into the wall until it happens type of action, but really just holding that idea lightly and taking baby steps. That's a huge process. And I'll actually share with you, when I was taking Brian Johnson's Optimal Living 101 course, the question that he asked us was, what's the number one thing you can start doing today that if you started doing this today would have the greatest impact on your life? And figure out what that is, and then make a commitment to do that every single day, even if it's only for a minute, even if it's only for 1 minute. So for me, it was meditation. Since that moment, I've meditated every single day. Most of the time I meditate for 30 minutes. But sometimes, I've meditated for 5 minutes. So I would say kind of focusing in on that question, what is the number one thing you could start doing today that would have the greatest impact on your life, and then start doing it?
That's awesome, man. The call has been so much more than I was expecting. I mean, I knew I was going to get great content, but the stuff you've gone over, like for instance the Viktor Frankl or the saying by Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn actually had a really important point to back up your recommendation to start journals, and his kind of revolved around the same concept of you can go out and buy a book, and the book may be $37, $57, $77, and that book will already have writing in it. But he would go out and he would spend $27 on a completely empty book. And he would do a lot of talks for children and high schools and intermediates. In New Zealand, they'd be intermediates. But he would talk to these kids, and then they would ask him why he would pay so much money for an empty book. And then he would explain to them that by the end of him writing in that journal, but he would say that after he's put in all this knowledge, all this experience into this one book, do they think that the book would still have the same value of that $27? And his point was to purchase a book that was $27 and then complete a book that would be priceless. So I think that's telling for anyone that's looking to write a journal, because those are the enduring benefits, that you can look back on your past, evaluate where you've come from, what you've done, and work out how to go wherever you want to go in the future just by having a journal.
Hey, absolutely, man. 100% agree with you. And I think sometimes I've had the notion that journaling is for, they come with pink covers with little fairy pens, and they're for girls who are like 8 years old. But that hasn't been my experience. I've only had one of those pink journals, and I swear it was when I was, 18. I'm past that stage. So I would really I would really recommend, just kind of saying, hey, let me spend some time with myself, even if it's just, you usually create lists. You could just get a journal, start creating the lists in there. Start writing words that make you happy. Like when I first started journaling, I would just write words that I liked, wisdom, love, courage, truth, justice, peace, passion, enthusiasm, presence, integrity, virtue, purpose, playfulness, joy. Whatever I was feeling, I would just start writing those words in my journal. And it was an awesome practice.
Wicked, man. So once again, for anyone that's looking for more information, to find out a little bit more about Jacob Sokol, then we recommend you check out his website, sensify.com. Sign up to his newsletter so that you can get regular updates from what he's doing, because the content that Jacob posts is stuff, well, frankly, it's balls-to-wall stuff. You're not going to get it on many other philosophy websites or positive thinking websites. This guy will just shoot it straight and shoot it hard. And for me, it's been refreshing because, like I say, you can get a lot of airy-fairy stuff if you're looking for positive thinking inspiration. But I personally recommend him because I've met the guy. He's pretty awesome. I think you'll all agree from listening to the call. But once again, thanks a lot for the call, Jacob.
Hey, yeah, my pleasure, man. Thank you for taking the opportunity to just sit down and engage with me. And I just want to make it clear that I'm also really accessible. And if there's anybody else out there that wants to communicate, it doesn't need to be about philosophy or psychology or business, but just about life. Like, I'm open. Let's kind of collectively create our ideal lives together. I'm all for it. So if there's any way I can help anybody, or you guys just want to chat, hit me up. You could find out my contact information on sensify.com.
Sweet. Oh, and I forgot to mention twitter.com/JacobSokol. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And the Facebook website is?
It is the same. So it's facebook.com/Sensify.